A Day in an Ottoman Coffeehouse. Section 1. Before the shutters open, tonight we are going to travel back to Istanbul in the early 18th century, to a city resting between two seas and two continents. The imperial domes and slender minarets are still dark against the sky. The waters of the Golden Horn move quietly below the hills, carrying faint reflections from a few lamps that have burned through the night. There is no need to hurry. Nothing is required of you. You do not need to remember every name, every street, or every detail. You may simply enter the city gently, as though stepping into a memory that has been waiting in the dark. We are standing in a narrow lane, not far from the busy waterfront districts of Eminönü and Tahtakale. During the day, this neighborhood will fill with porters, merchants, craftsmen, sailors, apprentices, and men carrying messages between shops and warehouses. But before sunrise, the lane belongs to silence, cats, and the soft movement of air beneath wooden eaves. The buildings rise close together. Their lower walls are stone, cool and solid. Above them, timber-framed upper floors lean slightly over the street. Closed shutters hide sleeping rooms. Roof tiles hold the night moisture. A thin thread of smoke escapes from one chimney and disappears into the blue-black sky. Ahead of you is a coffee house. Its broad wooden shutters are still closed, but a faint glow can be seen through the gaps. The sign above the entrance is simple and painted by hand. Beneath it, a wooden bench waits against the wall. During the day, men will sit there with small cups balanced between their fingers, watching the lane and greeting those who pass. For now, the bench is empty. From inside comes the soft scrape of metal against ash. Someone is waking the fire. A moment later, you hear the quiet knock of wood being placed beside the hearth, followed by the low breath of bellows. The sounds are careful and unhurried. They are the first signs that the coffee house is beginning its day. Far away, across roofs and courtyards, a watchman calls the final hours of the night. His voice arrives weakened by distance. Then the city becomes still again. You draw your cloak a little closer and breathe in the cool air. It smells of damp stone, sea salt, old timber, and the first trace of charcoal smoke. Soon the shutters will open. The brazier will glow. Copper pots will be arranged near the heat. Coffee will be ground, water will be warmed, and the first visitors will arrive from the waking streets. Until then, you remain outside for a few quiet breaths, listening to Istanbul prepare itself for morning. Above the lane, one shutter opens for only a moment. A hand places a clay pot on the sill, then withdraws. Somewhere behind the walls, a sleeper turns beneath a blanket. The city is not awake yet, but thousands of small beginnings are gathering behind closed doors. Section 2. Ember, ash, and copper. A narrow side door opens and the coffeehouse keeper steps into the lane. He carries a small broom made from bound twigs. His wool vest is fastened over a plain shirt, and a cloth is wrapped neatly around his head. He looks first toward the sky, judging the hour by its faint change of color, then begins to sweep the stone threshold. The broom makes a dry, whispering sound. Dust, leaves, and tiny fragments of charcoal gather in a small line. A cat watches from beneath the bench, its eyes reflecting the glow from the doorway. The keeper pauses to place a few crumbs near the wall. The cat approaches only after he has turned away. You are invited inside. The room is warmer than the street, though the fire has only just been revived. The coffee house is long and low, with whitewashed walls darkened near the ceiling by years of smoke. Wooden beams cross above you. Along three sides of the room are raised platforms covered with reed mats, cushions, and folded kilims. Low stools and small tables can be moved whenever a group needs more space. At the far end stands the hearth. It is the heart of the coffee house. A bed of charcoal glows beneath pale ash. The keeper kneels and uses a metal tool to open a small channel through the coals. Orange light appears, deep and steady. He adds several pieces of charcoal, then works the bellows until a gentle heat fills the corner. Copper surrounds the fire. Small sesvies hang from hooks, each with a long handle. Larger vessels hold fresh water, trays rest against the wall. Rows of tiny porcelain cups sit upside down on a shelf, protected from dust by a piece of clean cloth. Some cups are plain, others carry blue flowers, red lines, or delicate gilding around the rim. The keeper takes each copper pot in turn and polishes it with a cloth. The movement is slow and familiar. Light from the hearth travels across the curved metal, creating warm circles on the wall. A young apprentice enters from the back room carrying a bucket of water. He is still sleepy. His hair is untidy, and he suppresses a yawn as he pours the water into a covered jar. The keeper says nothing about the yawn. Instead, he points to the cups. The apprentice begins to arrange them on a tray. There is a quiet order to every task. Ash is cleared, water is checked, cloths are folded, spoons are counted. A wooden box containing coffee beans is brought from a dry shelf and placed near the hearth. Outside, the sky is lightening. Inside, the coals settle into an even glow. The coffee house is not yet open, but its rhythm has begun. A faint haze gathers near the beams and finds its way toward a small opening above the hearth. It carries no urgency, only the smell of a room used in the same way for many years. The copper responds to the growing fire with tiny sounds as the metal warms. Section 3. Roasting the morning coffee. The keeper opens the wooden coffee box. A deep, warm scent rises from it, faint at first, then fuller as he lifts a handful of beans. They has travelled a long distance to reach this room. Coffee has crossed the Red Sea from Yemen, passed through ports, warehouses, customs houses, and the hands of merchants before arriving in Istanbul. To the people who will soon enter, the journey will be contained within a single small cup. Some beans are already roasted, but the keeper prepares a fresh portion for the morning. He places them in a shallow metal roasting pan with a long handle and holds it above the charcoal. The apprentice watches closely. This is a simple task only when performed by someone who understands the fire. The pan moves continuously. The beans roll over one another with a dry, soft rattle. Their color deepens. At first, the aroma is green and grassy. Then it becomes toasted, nutty, and finally dark and familiar. A few beans release tiny cracking sounds. The keeper lifts the pan slightly away from the heat, then brings it closer again. No movement is wasted. When the roast is ready, he pours the beans into a wooden cooling tray. A small cloud of fragrant steam rises. The apprentice stirs them with a flat spoon so the heat escapes evenly. The entire coffee house now smells of roasted coffee, charcoal, timber, and clean water. After the beans have cooled, a portion is placed into a tall brass mortar. The apprentice takes the pestle with both hands. The first strike is too loud. The keeper raises one finger and the boy adjusts his movement. Soon the sound becomes steady and rounded. Lift, fall, turn, lift, fall, turn. The beans break into smaller pieces, then into a fine powder. Between each series of strokes, the apprentice scrapes the sides of the mortar. The keeper checks the grind by rubbing a little between his fingers. It must be fine enough to remain suspended in the water as the coffee is heated. Beyond the closed shutters, the first footsteps pass through the lane. A porter coughs. A wooden cart moves somewhere nearby. From the harbour comes the distant creak of rigging and the splash of an oar entering water. The keeper measures the ground coffee into a small covered container. He does not prepare a large batch in advance. Each order will be made carefully, one or several cups at a time, according to the sweetness requested by the guest. The apprentice wipes the rim of the mortar and returns it to its place. The keeper looks once more around the room. The cushions are straight, the cups are ready, the charcoal is even, the coffee is fragrant and fresh. He walks toward the front shutters and lifts the wooden bar. The roasted beans cool beneath the first light, entering through the opened gap of the shutter. Their uneven surfaces shine for a moment before becoming dark again. The keeper chooses one bean, breaks it between his fingers, and studies the center before giving another quiet nod. Section 4. The first cup of the day. The shutters open outward with a low wooden groan. Cool morning air enters the coffee house and meets the warmth of the hearth. For a few moments, the lane and the room seem to breathe into one another. The sky above the roofs has turned pale grey. A thin band of gold rests behind the distant hills. Shopkeepers are beginning to open doors. Somewhere nearby, a baker carries a tray of warm bread beneath a cloth. The smell passes briefly through the open front of the coffee house, mixing with the scent of roasted coffee. The first customer arrives before the benches have warmed in the light. He is an elderly man who works as a night guard for a warehouse near the water. His cloak carries the smell of mist and rope. He greets the keeper by name and chooses the same place he chooses every morning, near the hearth, but not too close to the smoke. There is no need for him to explain his order. The keeper already knows it. Water is measured into a small ksezve. A spoonful of finely ground coffee is added, followed by a little sugar. The keeper stirs only while the water is cool, then places the pot near the edge of the charcoal. The old guard rests both hands on his knees and watches the fire. His night has been long. He has listened to ships settle against the quay, to rats moving behind grain sacks, and to the occasional voices of late workers. Now he is nearly finished with his duties. The coffee warms gradually. A dark foam begins to rise around the edge of the sezve. The keeper lifts the pot before it boils over, lets the foam settle, then returns it briefly to the heat. When the surface rises again, he pours the coffee into a small cup, preserving the foam as carefully as possible. The cup is placed on a metal saucer. Beside it is a small glass of water. The guard drinks the water first. Then he lifts the cup. He does not swallow immediately. He takes a small sip and lets the warmth remain in his mouth. His shoulders lower, his eyes close for the length of one breath. Outside, the first call to prayer moves across Istanbul. One voice begins, then another answers from a farther minaret. The sound travels above roofs, courtyards, warehouses, and the quiet surface of the Golden Horn. The keeper pauses beside the hearth. The apprentice stands still with a cloth in his hands. The old guard lowers his cup. For a few moments, the whole room listens. When the call fades, the morning resumes. The guard takes another sip. The keeper begins preparing a second czezwę. Somewhere in the lane, someone offers a greeting. The first cup of the day has been served. Steam rises only briefly from the cup. It curls into the cool air and vanishes before reaching the old guard's face. The drink is small, yet it marks a boundary between the duties of the night and the sleep waiting for him at home. Section 5. The neighborhood. Wakes. Morning spreads through the district one doorway at a time. The coffee house now opens fully toward the lane, and from your place near the wall, you can watch the neighborhood gather itself for the day. Across the street, a shopkeeper removes wooden panels from the front of his store. Inside are coils of rope, baskets, wooden pegs and tools for ships and warehouses. He hangs several lengths of rope from iron hooks, then sweeps the floor toward the street. A water carrier passes with leather containers balanced across his shoulders. The weight makes his steps slow and even. He stops at a nearby house, disappears through a doorway, and returns with an empty vessel. A boy follows him carrying tin cups that knock softly together. Porters begin to appear from the direction of the quay. Some wear broad leather pads across their backs and shoulders. They will carry sacks, chests, jars, timber, and whatever else the merchants require. Before the heavier work begins, several enter the coffee house. They choose a platform near the front where they can see the street. Their greetings are cheerful, but not loud. One man removes his cap and smooths his hair. Another stretches his hands toward the warmth of the room. The apprentice carries water, while the keeper asks how each man prefers his coffee. One requests it plain. Another asks for a little sugar. A third says he will share a pot with his brother, who has not yet arrived. Small cups begin to move through the room. The aroma grows stronger as each czezwę is heated near the coals. Spoons touch saucers. Cups are lifted and replaced. Voices form a gentle layer beneath the sounds of the street. The conversation is practical. A ship arrived during the night. A merchant is expected from Bursa. A warehouse roof needs repair. The price of firewood has risen. A porter has heard that work will be plentiful near the customs house. No one knows every detail. Information arrives in pieces carried by people who have seen, heard, or guessed. The coffee house collects these pieces. News is compared, questioned, corrected, and passed onward. A man selling simit appears outside with a tray balanced on his head. The rings of bread are golden and covered with sesame. The keeper calls him closer, and several customers buy breakfast. The smell of warm bread fills the room. The old night guard finishes his coffee and stands. He leaves a coin on the tray, thanks the keeper, and steps into the growing daylight. Soon he will return home and sleep while the rest of the city works. His place is taken almost immediately by a clerk carrying a bundle of papers beneath his arm. The neighborhood is awake now, and the coffee house has become one of its centers. The lane now contains many separate rhythms. A broom moves quickly across one threshold and slowly across another. A hammer tests a hinge. Bread trays pass overhead. Each sound belongs to one trade, but from the coffee house they combine into the steady breathing of the district. Section 6. A room made for conversation. As the morning grows brighter, you have time to notice the coffee house itself more clearly. It is not a palace, and nothing within it is especially luxurious. Yet every part of the room has been shaped by long use. The wooden floor near the hearth has been darkened by countless steps. The edges of the raised platforms are smooth where hands have rested. cushions have been repaired with patches of different cloth, each one adding another small piece of colour. The front of the coffee house remains open to the lane. A wooden awning extends outward, giving shade and protection from light rain. Beneath it, 2 benches allow guests to sit half inside the room and half within the life of the street. Along one wall hangs a row of long stemmed pipes. They belong to regular visitors or can be prepared for those who request them. The keeper stores tobacco carefully in covered containers away from the damp air. The scent is present, but faint, blended with coffee and charcoal rather than dominating the room. Near the center stands a small fountain basin supplied from a water jar. It is not grand enough to make the room cool, but the quiet sound of water softens the air. Guests wash their hands, wet a cloth, or fill a cup before drinking coffee. The walls carry modest decorations. A piece of calligraphy rests above the hearth. A painted view of the Bosphorus hangs near the entrance. Beside it is a shelf holding several books and folded manuscripts. Not every guest can read, but words still enter the room through those who can. A regular customer known for his clear voice sometimes reads letters, poems, notices, or stories aloud. Others bring news from the market, the docks, government offices, workshops, and distant towns. The coffee house is both a room and a crossing place. People arrive with different trades and experiences, then remain long enough for their worlds to overlap. The seating encourages this. There are no private tables hidden behind walls. Men sit beside acquaintances and strangers. A conversation may begin with a greeting, move toward the weather, touch on trade, and end with a story from years ago. The keeper knows when to join and when to remain silent. He listens while polishing cups. He remembers who owes for yesterday, who has found work, whose son is ill, and which 2 guests should not be seated too close when both are tired. The apprentice learns these things as carefully as he learns to make coffee. From your cushion, the room feels balanced between movement and rest. People come and go, yet the hearth remains steady. Voices rise and settle, but the sound never becomes harsh. The coffee house is ready to hold the day. Even the light is arranged by the shape of the room. Morning brightness rests near the entrance, while the rear platforms remain soft and dim. A guest may choose the lively edge beside the street or the deeper shade, where conversation becomes private without ever becoming hidden. Section 7. Merchants, porters, and apprentices. By mid-morning, the lane is fully active. Sunlight reaches the upper stories, but leaves the street below in cool shade. The coffee house fills with men whose work connects the waterfront to the markets beyond. 2 merchants enter together. Their clothing is clean and carefully arranged, though not extravagant. One deals in textiles brought from Bursa and farther east. The other trades in dried fruit, spices, and goods arriving by sea. They sit near the back, where they can speak without being interrupted by every passerby. A porter follows carrying a small wooden chest. He places it beside them and receives a cup of water from the apprentice. The chest contains samples, papers, and seals rather than heavy merchandise. Even so, the porter rolls one shoulder as though the strap has pressed against it for many streets. At the front, several apprentices share bread and coffee before returning to their masters. One works for a coppersmith, another is learning bookbinding. The youngest spends most of his day in a warehouse copying numbers and carrying messages. Their conversation moves quickly. They compare the strictness of their masters, discuss a festival procession they hope to see, and argue gently about which wrestling champion is strongest. One claims to have seen a famous poet near the book market. The others do not believe him. The keeper places a tezve before the merchants and withdraws. Their speech is quieter. They discuss the arrival of a shipment, the quality of cloth, the timing of payments, and the reliability of a boat captain. A folded paper changes hands. One merchant studies the writing, then returns it. Around them, the coffee house continues without needing to choose one kind of guest. Laborers sit near clerks. Craftsmen greet sailors. A man who repairs scales speaks with another who measures grain. Their cups are similar, though their work and income differ. The apprentice carries a tray through the room with practiced care. He has learned to move sideways between extended legs, pipes, walking sticks, and bundles. When one customer reaches unexpectedly for his cup, the boy shifts the tray without spilling a drop. The keeper notices and gives a small approving nod. Outside, a heavily loaded cart passes slowly. Its wheels strike the uneven stones with a dull rhythm. Men step aside, then return to their places. Dust rises in the sunlit part of the lane and drifts beneath the awning before settling. A messenger arrives, speaks briefly to one of the merchants, and leaves again. The meeting at the back ends. Coins are counted. The porter lifts the chest. Within moments, their cushions are occupied by two sailors who smell of tar, salt, and the morning wind. The coffee house changes with every arrival, yet somehow remains the same room. The sailors bring a different kind of motion into the room. Even while seated, their bodies seem to remember shifting decks. One rests a hand around his cup whenever a cart passes, as though steadying it against an invisible wave. Section 8. Water from the fountain. Near the warmest part of the morning, the water carrier returns. This time, he brings fresh water for the coffee house itself. His leather containers are dark with moisture. He lowers them carefully beside the entrance and rests against the wall. The apprentice hurries to bring a wooden cup. The carrier drinks slowly, then wipes his forehead with the back of his hand. Water is essential to every cup served here. Coffee may carry the stronger aroma, but the keeper pays equal attention to the water that enters the sezve. It must be fresh, clean, and free from the stale taste of an uncovered vessel. The carrier has filled his containers at a neighborhood fountain supplied by the city's network of channels and reservoirs. The fountain stands beneath a small stone canopy several streets away. Its carved spouts run into a basin worn smooth by jars, cups, hands, and years. The apprentice empties the old water from a cleaning basin, rinses it, and begins transferring the new supply into large covered jars. Each jar is made from porous clay, allowing a little water to evaporate through the walls and cool what remains inside. The keeper lifts the lid of the main jar and checks its scent. Satisfied, he replaces it with care. Customers watch without much interest because the work is ordinary. Yet the coffee house depends upon countless ordinary tasks. Charcoal must arrive, cups must be washed, water must be carried, coffee must be purchased, roasted, ground, and protected from moisture. Cushions must be aired, floors must be swept, accounts must be remembered. The water carrier receives a small cup of coffee in return for part of his delivery. He sits outside beneath the awning where the air moves more freely. For several minutes, he is no longer carrying anything. A pigeon lands beside the gutter and drinks from a shallow puddle. The carrier tears a tiny piece from his bread and drops it nearby. The bird steps closer, tilting its head. Inside, the fountain basin makes its quiet sound. Water moves from a small brass tap, touches stone, and gathers below. The room feels cooler simply because the sound is present. One of the sailors washes salt from his hands. A clerk fills his glass before lifting his coffee cup. The apprentice dampens a cloth and wipes the serving trays. When the carrier finishes, he stands and adjusts the broad strap across his shoulders. The containers are lighter now, but his day is far from over. He thanks the keeper and returns to the lane. For a little while, the open doorway frames him as he walks uphill through the crowd. Then he disappears, leaving fresh water and a sense of coolness behind. A little condensation appears on the outside of the clay jar. The apprentice touches it with 2 fingers and smiles at the coolness. In the warm room, that small sensation feels almost luxurious, though it comes only from earth, water, and moving air. Section 9. Sounds from the Golden Horn. Although the Golden Horn cannot be seen directly from the coffeehouse, its presence enters through every open door and conversation. A breeze moves up from the water, carrying the smell of salt, wet rope, fish, timber, and tar. It reaches the lane in gentle intervals, cooling the shaded benches before moving onward between the buildings. From the quay comes the groan of a ship settling against its moorings. Wooden hulls answer the water with low creaks. Oars touch the surface. Porters call warnings as they move heavy loads. Gulls circle above the roofs, their voices sharp but distant. The sailors seated near the front identify the sounds without looking. One turns his head when a particular bell rings from the harbour. Another pauses when men begin chanting together as they pull a rope. Work near the water has its own rhythm, and those who know it can hear where a ship is being unloaded, where a boat is departing, and where someone has allowed a line to slip. A fisherman enters carrying the morning air with him. His hands are clean, but the smell of the sea remains in his clothes. He orders coffee without sugar and sits beside the sailors. They ask about the catch. He answers with a shrug that means neither good nor terrible. Soon they are speaking of currents, weather, and the habits of boats. One sailor has come from Alexandria. Another remembers a winter storm near the Dardanelles. The fisherman describes a fog so thick that the opposite shore vanished entirely. Their stories remain calm. No one tries to make the sea more dangerous than it was. Each man knows that water can be generous one day and difficult the next. Respect does not require drama. At the back of the room, the textile merchant has returned with a customer. Their conversation concerns cloth, but the harbour shapes that conversation too. A delayed ship changes a price, a damaged sail delays a delivery. Rain in one region affects grain in another. The coffeehouse gathers these distant movements into a single room. The keeper prepares several cups at once. Foam rises in 3 sesvies placed at different points near the charcoal. He turns each handle slightly, judging the heat by sight and sound. The apprentice waits with the tray. Outside, sunlight brightens the upper walls. The lane remains shaded, but the air is warmer now. A gull lands briefly on a roof beam above the awning. It looks down at the customers, decides there is nothing to steal, and flies toward the water. Its wings make one soft rush through the air. Then the sounds of the Golden Horn continue, distant and steady. beneath the life of the coffeehouse. Between the louder harbour sounds are long spaces filled only by water and wind. Those quieter intervals are what remain when the men stop speaking. For a few breaths, the coffeehouse seems to float above an unseen shore. Section 10. Midday, News and Letters. Near midday, a man enters carrying a leather folder beneath his arm. He is known in the neighborhood for reading and writing letters on behalf of those who need help. His beard is trimmed neatly, and an ink stain darkens the side of one finger. He chooses a place with good light near the open front. The apprentice brings him coffee and clears a small table. Before long, a porter approaches with a folded letter received from his brother in Edirne. The porter can recognize names and numbers, but the longer lines remain difficult. He sits beside the letter reader, who opens the paper carefully and smooths it beneath one hand. The room grows a little quieter. The letter contains no royal decree and no great secret. It speaks of family, work, weather, and travel. A roof has been repaired. A child has recovered from fever. An uncle is considering a journey to Istanbul. The harvest appears promising. The writer asks whether the porter has received the woolen vest sent months ago. The porter listens with his eyes lowered. When the reading ends, he asks for one sentence to be repeated. Then he smiles. The letter reader folds the paper along its old lines and offers to write a reply later in the afternoon. Others bring smaller questions. A craftsman needs help understanding an account. A sailor asks about a notice posted near the customs house. A young apprentice wants the meaning of a line of poetry he has copied because he likes the sound of it. News also arrives without paper. A customer has heard that a road outside the city is being repaired. Another says that a caravan from the east has reached Üsküdar. Someone reports that a respected teacher will speak after afternoon prayer. Each piece of information is tested by the room. Who told you? When did they hear it? Did they see it themselves? Some stories survive the questions. Others dissolve gently into uncertainty. The keeper does not interrupt unless the conversation becomes too heated. Today it remains mild. The warmth of midday has slowed everyone. Cups are lifted less often. A man near the wall begins to doze with his chin resting against his chest. Outside, the sun stands high above the lane. The awning casts a clear shadow. Cats have moved beneath carts and steps where the stones remain cool. The letter reader takes another small sip, then removes paper, ink, and a reed pen from his folder. The porter begins dictating his reply. The first sentence sends greetings to everyone in the household. The second confirms that the woolen vest arrived safely. Within the coffee house, distance is narrowed by a calm voice, a sheet of paper, and a cup beside the writer's hand. The reed pen makes a faint scratching sound as it crosses the page. The writer pauses often, not because the words are difficult, but because he wants the message to carry the speaker's meaning accurately. A letter must travel farther than a voice and survive more handling. Section 11, Tavla and Chess. After the midday rush, the keeper brings out 2 game boards from beneath a platform. One is a tavla board, its wooden surface divided into long triangular points. The pieces are smooth from use. The other is a small chessboard with figures carved in a simple style. Neither set is expensive, but both have entertained years of customers. 2 porters begin a game of tavla near the open front. They shake the dice in a wooden cup, then release them with a soft clatter. Their movements are quick and confident. Each has played so often that the board seems to arrange itself beneath his fingers. The game produces conversation as much as competition. One man complains that fortune favors his opponent. The other says fortune merely recognizes skill. A third customer offers advice that neither player has requested. The keeper smiles while polishing a tray. Despite the teasing, the mood remains gentle. No coin is placed on the game. The reward is victory itself and the right to mention it later. At the back, the chess game unfolds more slowly. A bookbinder plays against an older clerk. They sit nearly motionless, studying the arrangement of carved pieces. Between moves, each drinks coffee that has already cooled. The apprentice watches when his work allows. Tavla attracts him with its speed, but chess holds his attention because so much seems to happen in silence. He begins to recognize that the long pauses are part of the game rather than a failure to act. A piece moves, a hand withdraws. The room waits. Outside, the lane continues at another pace. Vendors call, carts pass. A hammer rings from a workshop. Yet within the shaded coffeehouse, time can be measured by dice, moves, and small cups. The Tavla game ends first. The winner gathers the pieces with unnecessary dignity. The loser immediately asks for another round. The chess players continue. A customer who has been resting near the fountain opens his eyes and studies the board from a distance. Another man leans closer, then remembers that silent observers should not interfere. Eventually, the clerk moves a piece and quietly announces the end. The bookbinder studies the board for a few breaths, then nods. There is no argument. The pieces are returned to their starting places. For a while, both boards remain ready. A new pair of players may arrive, or no one may touch them until evening. The keeper leaves them where they are, part of the room's invitation to stay a little longer. The boards also attract people who do not wish to play. Watching gives the hands somewhere to rest and the eyes somewhere to settle. A guest can remain part of the gathering without finding a new subject to discuss. Section 12. The quietest hour. The middle of the afternoon brings the quietest hour of the coffeehouse day. Many craftsmen have returned to their shops. Porters are working near the docks. Merchants are meeting in warehouses and covered markets. The letter reader has gone to deliver a reply. Even the street vendors have lowered their voices beneath the weight of the sun. Only a handful of customers remain. The man who had been dozing now lies along the edge of a platform with his folded cloak beneath his head. Another customer reads from a small book, moving his lips slightly without making a sound. Near the doorway, the old clerk from the chess game watches dust floating in a beam of sunlight. The keeper uses the calm interval to wash cups. The apprentice fills one basin with warm water and another with cool. Each cup is rinsed, wiped, inspected, and placed upside down on a clean cloth. Saucers are stacked, spoons are counted. The copper tsezves are rubbed until their surfaces brighten again. The work makes soft, repeating sounds. Water poured into a basin, porcelain touching cloth, metal placed gently on wood, charcoal settling beneath ash. The keeper lowers the awning slightly to reduce the glare. The coffeehouse becomes dimmer, cooler, and more enclosed. Outside, the lane appears almost white in the sun. A fly circles near the fruit peel left on a plate. The apprentice removes the plate and wipes the table. The fly disappears toward the doorway. From a nearby mosque comes the measured voice of someone reciting in a shaded room. The words are too distant to follow, but their cadence passes through the neighborhood like slow water. The sleeping customer shifts once and becomes still again. You sit near the fountain basin, listening to the room's smallest sounds. The water tap releases a single drop. A page turns. Timber expands softly in the afternoon heat. Somewhere above, a pigeon walks across the roof tiles. The keeper prepares one cup for himself. He makes it plain and pours it into a cup with a blue line around a rim. Instead of standing near the hearth, he sits for several minutes beside the apprentice. They do not speak. The boy drinks water, the keeper drinks coffee. Both look toward the open lane and the bright strip of sky above it. A coffee house is known for conversation, but it also knows how to hold silence. For this hour, nothing needs to happen. The boards remain untouched. The cups wait on their shelf. The neighborhood rests in the heat. Soon the shadows will lengthen and people will return. Heat presses gently against the shutters and awning, but the whitewashed walls keep part of it outside. In the dim room, coffee scents left from the morning have settled into the mats and timber. The air feels used, familiar, and safe. Section 13. A traveler from Anatolia. The quiet hour ends with the arrival of a traveler. He enters the lane leading a tired grey horse. Dust covers the lower edge of his cloak, and a rolled blanket is tied behind the saddle. He asks a nearby shopkeeper where he might find coffee and shade. The answer requires only a gesture toward the open front of the coffee house. The traveller secures the horse near a water trough and steps inside. The keeper greets him without asking too many questions. A stranger is often more comfortable after he has washed, rested, and taken his first sip. The apprentice brings water for the traveller's hands and face, then places a cool cup beside him. He drinks deeply. His coffee is prepared medium sweet. While it warms, he removes his outer cloak and folds it beside him. The cloth releases the scent of road dust, dry grass, and horse leather. Several customers return during this time. They notice the traveller, but no one crowds him. Curiosity in a coffee house has its manners. After the first few sips, he begins to speak with the keeper. He has come from central Anatolia, carrying messages and small goods for a relative in Istanbul. The journey has taken many days. He has crossed open plains, followed river valleys, slept in caravanserais, and passed through towns where the evening air was already cold. His descriptions are calm and precise. He remembers a stone bridge, a field of yellow flowers, and a roadside fountain shaded by a single tree. He speaks of waking before dawn to find frost on the saddle. He recalls the sound of bells from a caravan moving somewhere beyond a hill. The room listens. Most guests know travel through work, trade, military service, pilgrimage, or family connections. Yet every road belongs partly to the person who describes it. The traveller's account gives the afternoon a wider horizon. Someone asks whether the route was safe. Another asks about the condition of a particular road. A merchant wants to know whether pack animals are plentiful near one town. The traveller answers what he can and admits what he does not know. The apprentice brings bread, cheese, and olives. The traveller eats slowly as though reminding his body that the journey has paused. Outside, the grey horse lowers its head near the trough. A boy from the neighbouring shop brings it a handful of hay. The traveller sees this through the doorway and nods in thanks. For the next hour, he is no longer a man between distant places. He is simply another guest seated on a cushion, holding a small, warm cup while the shadows lengthen across the lane. On the road, the traveller has learned to notice small kindnesses: a filled trough, a shaded wall, a fair price, directions given without impatience. The coffee house adds itself to that private list of places where a stranger was allowed to rest before explaining who he was. Section 14. Poems in a Shaded Room. Later in the afternoon, the bookbinder returns carrying a small collection of poems. The volume is protected by a soft leather cover and wrapped in cloth. He has repaired its binding for a customer and is pleased with the result. Several regulars ask to see it. The bookbinder washes his hands, then unwraps the volume on a low table. The pages are cream-coloured, filled with careful lines of Ottoman script. Decorative headings appear in red and gold. The repair is nearly invisible unless one knows where to look. A young clerk turns the pages slowly. He recognizes a poem and asks permission to read it aloud. The coffee house settles. His voice is not theatrical. He reads with a measured cadence, allowing each line to find its place in the room. The poem speaks of evening light, separation, gardens, patience, and the strange distance between the heart and what it desires. Not every listener understands every image. That is not necessary. Some follow the meaning, others listen to the rhythm of the language. A porter who rarely reads closes his eyes because the sound reminds him of songs heard in childhood. When the poem ends, no one applauds. Instead, several men breathe out softly, and one asks for the final couplet again. The clerk repeats it. Conversation returns slowly. One customer offers another interpretation. The bookbinder explains that the poet may be using a garden as both a real place and a symbol. A sailor says the line about distance makes him think of the sea. The porter says it makes him think of home. Each response is accepted without needing to defeat the others. The keeper prepares fresh coffee for the group. The scent rises as the clerk chooses another page. Outside, the sunlight has softened. A breeze lifts the edge of the awning. This time, the poem is lighter. It describes a boastful man who mistakes a reflection for a rival. The listeners smile before the final line arrives. One man laughs, then covers his mouth so he does not interrupt the reader. The apprentice stands near the hearth, pretending to organize spoons while listening closely. The bookbinder notices and later allows him to hold the volume. The boy supports it with both hands. He cannot read every word, but he studies the shape of the writing and the fine repair along the spine. The book is wrapped again before the evening crowd arrives. For a little while after it is gone, the room seems to retain the rhythm of the poems, as though the walls have learned a softer way to listen. The repaired binding gives a soft sound when the book is closed. Leather meets paper, protecting the words from dust and careless hands. The volume will leave the coffee house, but the spoken lines have already passed into the memories of people who may never see the page again. Section 15. Afternoon prayer and returning light. The light changes before anyone mentions the hour. Sun that once fell almost straight into the lane now touches the upper walls at an angle. Timber frames cast longer shadows across plaster. The air begins to cool, and the neighborhood becomes active again after the afternoon pause. Then the call to prayer rises from a nearby minaret. Conversation softens. Some customers finish their cups and stand. Others remain seated, planning to pray a little later. The keeper covers the coffee container, checks the hearth, and leaves the apprentice to watch the room. Several men walk together toward the mosque. Their footsteps join the movement of shopkeepers, porters, and residents entering from other lanes. For a few minutes, the coffeehouse feels spacious. The traveller from Anatolia remains near the front. He has found the address he needs but will wait until the heat has faded further before continuing. He watches the street with the quiet patience learned from long roads. The apprentice gathers abandoned cups. He is more confident now than he was before dawn. The tray remains level. Each place is cleared without disturbing the folded cloaks and bundles left by customers who will return. Through the open front, you can see sunlight on a distant dome. The lead's surface gleams, then dims as a cloud moves across the sky. Pigeons circle above it in a loose group. The prayer ends. Men begin to return in small numbers, stopping to greet neighbors. The keeper reappears and uncovers the coffee. He adds fresh charcoal and adjusts the sesvis. The room fills again, but the quality of the day has changed. Morning belonged to preparation and work. Midday belonged to heat and necessary business. Afternoon begins to lean toward leisure. A craftsman sits longer than he intended. A merchant no longer checks the lane after every sentence. The tafla board is opened again. Someone asks whether the storyteller will come this evening. The keeper says he is expected after sunset. This answer moves gently through the room. A medda can transform an ordinary evening into a journey through distant places, comic misunderstandings, heroic adventures, and familiar neighborhood types. Some customers have heard tonight's performer many times. They still plan to come. The apprentice straightens the cushions and checks the lamps stored along the wall. Outside, the shadows continue to lengthen. The stone lane loses its glare. The breeze from the Golden Horn returns with a cooler edge. The coffeehouse prepares for the second half of its day. For a short time, the room contains the belongings of absent men: a folded cloak, a capped ink bottle, a bundle of tools, a walking stick leaned into a corner. Their owners will return, and so the objects wait without being moved. Section 16. Lamps at the edge of evening. As sunset approaches, the keeper begins to light the lamps. Each lamp is small, but together they change the room. One hangs near the entrance, another beside the shelf of cups, and two more are placed along the walls. Their flames are protected from drafts by glass or metal screens. Warm light settles across cushions, copper, faces, and the dark wooden beams above. The apprentice trims each wick before lighting it. A wick that is too long will smoke. One that is too short will give little light. Like the charcoal beneath the kesves, it requires balance. Outside, the sky turns pale gold over the roofs. The lane becomes a passage between shadowed walls and bright upper windows. Shopkeepers begin to bring valuable goods indoors, though many doors remain open for evening trade. Customers arrive in greater numbers. A group of coppersmiths enters after finishing work. Their hands carry dark traces of metal, despite washing. Two clerks arrive from a nearby office. A barber comes with his combs and razors wrapped safely in cloth. Several porters, free from the day's heaviest loads, lower themselves onto the front platform with grateful sighs. Coffee orders follow one another rapidly. The keeper works near the hearth while the apprentice carries trays. Water, coffee, and sugar are measured. Foam rises, cups fill. Coins pass from palm to palm or are recorded in memory for regular guests. The room becomes lively but not chaotic. Voices overlap in a warm murmur. Tavla pieces click. A pipe is prepared near the entrance, where smoke can move outward. Someone shares roasted chickpeas from a paper cone. The traveller stands to leave. He has rested, eaten, and regained the calm expression of a man ready to complete the final part of his journey. The keeper gives him directions once more. Several customers offer small corrections until the directions become more complicated than before. The traveller smiles, thanks them all, and steps into the evening. His horse follows slowly up the lane. A boy arrives carrying extra lamp oil. Another brings a bundle of clean cups from a nearby supplier. The keeper has expected a crowd. A storyteller's evening requires preparation, though the room itself will remain simple. No stage is built. A clear space near the center is enough. A chair, a walking stick, a cloth, and a performer's voice can create houses, markets, palaces, roads, and entire cities. The last sunlight disappears from the upper walls. Now the lamps hold the room together. The first insects of evening appear near the lamps but do not reach the flames behind their covers. One circles the glass, rests on the metal frame, and disappears toward the open front. Beyond the awning, the sky has become a deep, clear blue. Section 17. The Evening Crowd. After sunset, every cushion seems to find an occupant. Men sit shoulder to shoulder along the raised platforms. Late arrivals take stools near the back or stand beneath the awning. The coffeehouse keeper has opened the room as widely as possible, but the gathering remains intimate. Everyone is close enough to see the storyteller when he arrives. The crowd reflects the district. There are sailors, craftsmen, porters, clerks, small merchants, apprentices, and several visitors from other neighborhoods. An elderly teacher sits near the wall with a calm expression. Two young men who have been speaking too loudly are separated by older friends before they can distract the room. Coffee moves constantly. The apprentice carries trays of cups balanced at shoulder height. He sets them down with care, remembering which guest requested sugar and which prefers the coffee plain. Small glasses of water follow. A bowl of roasted chickpeas is passed from one group to another. The room is warmer now, the front remains open to the night air, and the breeze lifts smoke toward the lane. Outside, lanterns mark shop entrances. Shadows move across shutters and stone. Someone begins a tavla game but is persuaded to close the board. The storyteller will arrive soon, and dice would disturb the performance. The players accept this, though one insists he was about to win. News of the evening has drawn people from nearby streets. A fruit seller pauses outside with his empty baskets. A boatman joins friends near the door. A young apprentice who cannot afford another cup is allowed to remain because he has helped carry stools. The keeper moves through the room, adjusting space with small gestures. A cushion shifts, a walking stick is placed against the wall. A lamp is raised slightly so the center of the room becomes brighter. At last, a figure appears in the doorway. The Medda is not dressed like a prince, soldier, or hero. He wears ordinary clothing and carries a walking stick over one shoulder. A folded cloth rests beneath his arm. His face is composed, but his eyes are alert to every person in the room. The crowd makes space. He greets the keeper, accepts a small cup of coffee, and sits quietly for several minutes. No one demands that he begin at once. The pause is part of the evening. He drinks, studies the room, and listens to its mood. The final cups are placed. The apprentice takes his position beside the hearth. The Medda sets down his empty cup, rises, and steps into the open space. The coffeehouse becomes silent. People seated near the doorway quietly describe the room to those standing outside. A space opens whenever someone leaves, and another guest is guided into it. The gathering organizes itself through small courtesies rather than commands. Section 18. The Medda begins. The storyteller begins without music. He places the folded cloth across one shoulder and holds the walking stick lightly in his right hand. These simple objects will become whatever the story requires. The cloth may be a traveler's cloak, a merchant's sash, a woman's veil, or a bundle carried over a mountain road. The stick may serve as a cane, a spear, a door, an oar, or the proud posture of a foolish official. His first words are quiet. The audience leans closer. He introduces a small neighborhood not unlike the one outside, though he places it far enough away that no listener can claim to be personally described. In this neighborhood lives a man who is certain that he understands every trade, every road, every animal, and every human heart. The audience already recognizes the type. The Medda changes his stance, his shoulders rise, his chin moves forward. The confident man appears before them without costume or scenery. Then the storyteller becomes the man's patient neighbor. His voice softens, his back bends slightly. A conversation begins between two people performed by one body. The room responds with low laughter. The story is not rushed. The Medda allows scenes to form through details. A door sticks because of damp weather. A donkey refuses to cross a bridge. A merchant counts the same coins 3 times. A child notices what every adult has missed. Each character has a different rhythm. The boastful man speaks too quickly. The neighbor pauses before answering. The donkey communicates through silence, resistance, and one perfectly timed sound made by the storyteller. Even the keeper laughs at that. The apprentice stands still beside the hearth, forgetting for several moments that a kezve is warming. The keeper quietly lifts it before the foam rises too high. The story moves from the neighborhood to a ferry crossing, then to a market on the opposite shore. Through changes of voice and posture, the Medda creates boatmen, vendors, officials, travelers, and a woman selling herbs who understands the situation before anyone else. The coffeehouse becomes all of these places while remaining one lamplit room. Outside, the night deepens. A cart passes, but few listeners notice. The golden horn moves beyond the buildings. Lamps burn in windows. The city continues its countless private stories. Inside, one storyteller guides the audience along a single path. His voice grows softer before an important turn. The listeners become even more attentive. The boastful man is about to make the mistake that will teach him what advice could not. At moments, the storyteller turns his back halfway toward the audience, then looks over one shoulder to become another character. A slight change in the angle of his head is enough. The listeners complete the transformation with their imagination. Section 19. A story within the coffeehouse. The mistake begins with a locked chest. In the Medda's tale, a merchant has received a chest from a distant town. He believes it contains something valuable, but the key has been delayed. The boastful man announces that he can open any lock because he once watched a locksmith work for half an hour. Several listeners in the coffeehouse exchange amused looks. The storyteller kneels as though examining the imaginary chest. He squints, taps the walking stick against the floor, and mutters technical words that sound impressive but mean almost nothing. The merchant becomes anxious. The patient neighbor advises waiting for the key. The boastful man refuses. The Medar uses the cloth as a tool bundle. He pulls invisible instruments from it, each more unsuitable than the last. The room laughs as he tries a spoon, a hairpin, a carpenter's wedge, and finally, the handle of a kitchen pot. Then the chest opens by itself. It was never locked. The audience laughs more warmly now, but the story continues. Inside the chest is not gold, silk, or jewels. It contains carefully wrapped seedlings sent to the merchant's family garden. The boastful man has shaken, struck, and turned the chest so often that soil spills across the floor. His confidence disappears. The storyteller's posture changes. For the first time, the man speaks slowly. He helps gather the soil. He apologizes to the merchant. The patient neighbor does not mock him. Instead, he gives the man a broom. The final lesson is light enough to avoid becoming a lecture. Knowing when not to interfere may be a form of wisdom. The storyteller lets the silence rest for one breath. Then he adds that the boastful man later became an expert in sweeping. Laughter returns. The tale ends with the garden growing successfully despite the confusion. The seedlings become strong trees. Years later, the former boaster sits beneath their shade and tells children that he personally taught them how to grow. The Medda lowers the walking stick. For a few moments, the room remains inside the final image: a garden, broad shade, children, and an old man who has changed only partly. Then the listeners release the story. Some smile, some repeat favorite lines. One customer imitates the donkey's expression and receives another wave of laughter. The keeper sends a cup of coffee to the storyteller. He drinks while seated, his performance complete, but his presence still holding the room together. The apprentice begins serving fresh water. The audience speaks more softly than before, as though everyone has returned from a journey and needs time to recognize the familiar walls. Outside, the lane is quieter. Many shops have closed. The lamps of the coffee house shine warmly into the night. The tale has worked because it has given the listeners something familiar from a safe distance. Everyone has been foolish, overly certain, or too eager to help. Laughter allows the recognition to remain light, shared by the whole room rather than placed upon one person. Section 20. The Final Cup. After the story, the evening does not end immediately. Some guests leave because their homes are far away, or because work will begin before sunrise. They thank the keeper, greet the storyteller, and step into the lane in twos and threes. Their voices fade between the buildings. Others remain for one final cup. The coffee house is less crowded now. Cushions that were hidden beneath cloaks and knees reappear. The apprentice collects empty saucers, moving more slowly after the long day. His shoulders are tired, but he is proud of having served the evening crowd without breaking a cup. The keeper prepares coffee for the Medda, the elderly teacher, 2 craftsmen, and himself. He uses the last of the freshly ground portion from the morning. The brass container gives a hollow sound when the spoon touches the bottom. Water is measured, coffee is added, the sesvis settle near the charcoal. The group discusses the story, but no one tries to explain it completely. The teacher praises the timing of the final joke. One craftsman says he knows a man exactly like the boastful character. The other replies that everyone knows such a man, which may be the point. The Medda smiles but does not reveal whether any real person inspired the tale. Foam rises, the keeper pours. These final cups are taken more slowly than the cups of morning. No ship is waiting to be unloaded. No account must be carried to a merchant. The Tavla board is closed. The letters have been written. The day's work is finished. Outside, a night watchman passes with a lantern. The iron frame casts moving lines across the stone. He exchanges a greeting with the keeper, but does not enter. A cat slips through the doorway and settles near the remaining warmth of the hearth. The apprentice places a folded cloth at the edge of the platform so the animal does not lie directly in the ash. The storyteller drinks the last sip from his cup and turns it once on the saucer. The grounds remain at the bottom, dark and fragrant. No one attempts to read them. The night already contains enough stories. One by one, the final guests stand. The elderly teacher wraps his cloak. The craftsmen gather their tools. The medder folds his cloth and rests the walking stick over his shoulder. At the door, he promises to return another evening with a different tale. Then he disappears into the narrow street. The keeper watches until the sound of the stick has faded. Only the apprentice, the keeper, the sleeping cat, and a few glowing coals remain. The charcoal no longer needs to serve a crowd, so the keeper allows the heat to decline naturally. Each new glow is smaller than the last. The room cools around the guests, encouraging them gently toward cloaks, doors, and home. Section 21. Closing the coffee house. The apprentice begins with the cups. He carries them to the washing basin in small groups, careful not to let porcelain strike porcelain. Warm water loosens the dark coffee traces. A clean cloth removes the remaining moisture. Each cup is turned upside down on the shelf exactly as it was before sunrise. The keeper counts the coins from the day. He does not create a grand pile. Coffeehouse earnings arrive in small pieces: one cup, another cup, shared pots, regular accounts, and the occasional generous payment after a crowded evening. He separates money for coffee, charcoal, water, lamp oil, and other supplies. What remains is wrapped in cloth and placed in a wooden box. The tavla and chessboards are returned beneath the platform. Cushions are shaken and arranged. Pipes are cleaned and placed along the wall. The remaining water is covered. Coffee grounds are collected rather than scattered across the floor. The lamps are extinguished one by one. First, the lamp near the back wall. Then the lamp beside the cup shelf. The room contracts gently around the hearth. Outside, the lane is almost empty. A few windows glow above the street. Somewhere nearby, a baby cries briefly and is comforted. A door closes. Footsteps cross an upper wooden floor. The apprentice sweeps beneath the platforms and tables. He finds a tavla piece that rolled near the wall, 2 chickpeas, a folded scrap of paper, and a copper coin. He places the game piece with the board, throws away the chickpeas, leaves the paper near the keeper's box, and hands over the coin. The keeper recognizes it as payment from a regular customer who left early. The front benches are lifted inside. The wooden awning is secured. One shutter closes, then the other. Before lowering the final panel, the keeper looks along the lane. The night air carries a faint smell of the water. A lantern moves far downhill toward the harbor. Above the roofs, the sky is clear enough to show several stars. The last shutter closes. Inside, the apprentice covers the charcoal with ash, so a small core may survive until morning. The bright orange fades beneath grey. Heat remains, hidden and patient. The cat wakes and stretches. It knows a back door will soon open. The keeper takes the final lamp in his hand. Its light moves across the empty platforms, the polished sezvis, the water jar, the folded cushions, and the calligraphy above the hearth. The room that held so many voices is quiet again. The apprentice opens the side door. Cool air enters. The cat slips out first. Then the two men leave, and the keeper locks the door behind them. Without customers, the room appears larger. Places that seemed crowded an hour earlier now contain only the faint impressions left in cushions. The apprentice smooths each one with his palm, erasing the shapes of the day without erasing the day itself. Section 22. Istanbul. After the last cup. The coffee house now rests in darkness. Behind the shutters, cups wait upside down on their shelf. Copper pots hang above the cooling hearth. A little warmth remains beneath the ash. The tafla pieces are still. The storyteller's open space has become an ordinary patch of floor once more. Outside, Istanbul continues through the night. The keeper and apprentice walk uphill together for part of the way. Their footsteps are quiet on the stones. At a corner, the apprentice turns toward the small house where he sleeps with his family. The keeper continues alone, carrying the empty coin box beneath his arm. The neighborhood is familiar but changed by darkness. Shops that displayed rope, cloth, fruit, metal, and paper now present only wooden shutters. Cats cross the street without hurry. A night watchman's lantern glows beneath an arch and disappears. Downhill, the Golden Horn moves beneath the stars. Moored boats rise and fall almost invisibly. Ropes tighten, loosen, and creak. Water touches stone steps along the quay. Across the city, other coffee houses are closing. Some have hosted games, some have heard poems, some have carried debates late into the night. In one, a sailor may still be finishing a story. In another, a keeper may be covering his coals at this very moment. For centuries, coffee houses will remain places where cups and conversation share the same table. They will change in appearance and habit. New forms of news, entertainment, and public life will arrive. Yet something simple will continue. People will enter, sit near one another, and allow a drink to create time for words. Tonight you have followed one ordinary day. You arrived before the shutters opened. You watched charcoal wake beneath ash. Coffee beans were roasted, ground, measured, and warmed in copper sezvis. The first cup was served to a tired night guard. Porters, merchants, sailors, craftsmen, apprentices, readers, travelers, and storytellers filled the room. You listened to letters from distant family, dice on a tavla board, chess pieces placed in silence, poems read in afternoon shade, and a medda turning one cloth and one stick into an entire world. Now every sound has softened. The keeper reaches his home and closes the door. The watchman continues his round. A final lamp disappears behind a shutter. The city settles beneath domes, roofs, towers, and stars. Far below, water moves through the Golden Horn toward the Bosphorus and the open sea. The coffee house sleeps, ready to begin again when morning returns. There is nowhere else you need to go. You may let the room fade now. The warm copper, the small cups, the quiet fountain, the last ember beneath ash. And as Istanbul rests around you, you may rest as well. Before dawn, the hidden ember may still be alive. A tool will move the ash aside, air will reach the charcoal, and orange light will return. The first water will be poured, and the room will slowly remember all the motions of opening.